Hi everyone and welcome to tonight's webinar, Winning on New South Wales Racing with Mark Roden. Our New South Wales winners form analyst Mark is here with us tonight to share his insights and strategies. Mark, welcome.
Thanks very much, Daniel. Thanks for having us.
Guys, as in all of our previous webinars, tonight is totally interactive, so please feel free to fire in any questions and we'll endeavour to answer them as we move through. Also, stay tuned. At the end of the webinar, we will be announcing the winner of our New South Wales Winners 1 month subscription. So stay on board for that. Mark, thank you for your time tonight. It's great to have you on board.
No problem at all. Yeah, great to be here.
For those of us that haven't come across you before, give us a little bit of a rundown and history from where what you've done in the past.
Sure. Always been interested in racing, from a very young age. Through my father, who was a very keen and successful punter. Really got my start professionally in 1999 when I got a job with Darwin All Sports, run by Mark Reed up in Darwin, which became IAS. So I started working there in 1999, moving on to Sportsbet in 2009, and I was with Sportsbet until 2016. And for well over 10 years, the bulk of my time in sort of corporate bookmaking world, I was a head trader on New South Wales racing. So in the about 18 months since I left that job, I've been providing services like this and betting for myself to make a living. So and to do that, I've continued to concentrate on New South Wales racing, particularly Sydney, because that's where my experience and expertise has been for such a long time. So yeah, that's just a quick rundown on what's got me to this point.
Fantastic, mate. I know I've been looking forward to this, and speaking to a lot of our clients, they've also been looking forward to hearing your insights and betting strategies moving forward. So, mate, I will throw to you.
Okay, so the way we thought we'd approach tonight was to look at how I basically do the form on a race, and we've selected a race at Rose Hill on Saturday, this Fillies and Mares Benchmark 80, which is only a field of 8, but not bad quality. So so we'll kick off by doing that, and of course, if anyone's got any questions or anything they'd like to point out at any stage, jump in and we'll cover that too. So basically, what we're looking at on the screen here is sort of the master sheet in the spreadsheet I use to do the form. I use a database which was built by another Champion Bets service provider called Cam O'Brien, who's actually my cousin, and we both use the database that he has developed over the last 10 years or so. It's not commercially available, and it's just restricted to the two of us basically at this point. But if anyone has seen any of his webinars for Champion Bets, it may look familiar to you. So that would explain that. Anyway, just to briefly run through what we're looking at, this is just a master sheet with the field, basically, the distance of the race and the class and the race name, prize money, all that basic sort of information. Then, of course, the runners, riders, weights, claims, trainer, got the sire there too. So all that basic information's there, but this is also once I start entering ratings in when I'm doing the form, those fields here will become populated with ratings and eventually prices, and that is ultimately what I'm going to make my betting decisions off. So I might as well just run through the sheet and have a look at a few of these horses and hopefully give you an idea of the process of how I do the form. So we just use this next runner tab to skip through the field. Oh, sorry, I should point out the very first thing I do when doing the form is, of course, a speed map, which I would think most people analysing the way I do would do. So I'll just take you to that sheet here. It's pretty basic. This I use 8s, a scale of sort of 1 to 8, 1 being leaders and 8 being backmarkers, to just give them just to give an idea of their early speed and their preferred racing position in a field. And then obviously depending on the barrier and maybe track pattern and those sort of things, just try and put them in a position of where they'll be in the run and give me an idea of any sort of decisions the jockey might have to make from his particular barrier and, the shape of the particular field. So in this case, we've got, it's an 1100, it's a sprint race out of the chute at Rose Hill over 1100. I've identified 2 clear leaders, Book Magic and Alassio. And beyond that, there's a bit of a gap there, difficult to get who sits sort of handy, fairly handy. So it'll be either here or here, I would be suggesting. Garland O'Shea, who's visiting from Victoria, who I haven't actually seen race in Sydney yet, but looks like it'll race midfield. And most of the others have been tending to get back in their races of late. So that is a rough idea of what the map will look like, I think. Anyway, so we'll just move on to move through each of the runners and give you an idea of how I assign a figure to them and then price. So start with Upscale, who is resuming here. Just to jump back. One of the key things we need to look for with each horse is this figure here, the job. I've assigned on the top sheet the race a strength figure, which is sort of based on past history of similar races in the same class and what the rating figure done on that day was. So I sort of derive from that a horse or the race would need to rate at least 100. Then, depending on the different weights carried by the horses, they are then assigned a job figure, which is here. So Upscale, to win the race, according to the strength I've assigned the race, needs to be rating in the 105 region to be a winning chance in this. This is all derived from the fact she's carrying 60.5 kilos, as we can see over here. Now, as we can see over here, this column here is the past performance ratings in our database for each of the horses, and that we've got all of Upscale's career in this column here. We can see that 2 preparations ago, back in 2016, she twice hit a mark of 109, which would be more than enough to make her a big chance in this. One of them was first up, over 1,100 metres. But the thing that concerns me about her is that in her last preparation, last winter, she never got above 103. So that may be an indication that as she's getting older, she's 5, she'll be 6 next month. Even though she's lightly raced, she is aging a little, that maybe she won't be hitting those heights of 109 again. I had a look at her recent trials earlier, and they were quiet trials. There was nothing wrong with them at all. There wasn't anything that really suggested to me that she was going to race out of her skin first up on a soft track with the big weight. So I'd be more inclined to give her a figure in the region of 105. Just to give you an idea, in rough terms, a point on the rating scale is worth about half a length. So if I give her 105 and enter it in this field here, I'm effectively saying that I'm assessing it around 2 lengths off her very best of 2 preparations ago, but still better than any figure she managed to return in her last preparation. So even though it's a couple of lengths off her best, I don't think I'm being particularly harsh on her, considering her performances last prep. She's had the three trials, as we can see here, so she should be forward enough and ready to run a race, but whether she's actually capable now of doing the big 109s that we see back here, I don't know. So I'm prepared to assess her at about 105 at this point. Now, you notice when I entered that figure in there, that in this field, that went from blank to $1. Now, that's its price. Now, because I've only priced one horse to this point, its price is $1, so a 100% chance. But as we assign figures to the rest of the field, that will change and they'll all be lined up accordingly. So,
Mark, can I just grab you for 1 second? Upscale is a horse that's tended to race back
Yep.
in its races. Do you take into account, this is just a question we've got shot through,
Yep.
obviously track bias from previous meetings coming out of the chute there,
Yep.
and rate accordingly against that?
Definitely. Things like track bias on the day or pattern on the day are not actually factored into the rating. That's just a straight performance rating, which doesn't in itself allow for track bias or blocks and checks or any of that thing. It's just totally derived by time, weight carried, and beaten margin to allow for those sort of factors, which of course you have to when you're analysing form. Either refer to the video comment here, might have one of my own comments in here, or in more extreme cases, I actually assign a bonus figure of how much it may have been cost, by adverse circumstances on that day. So to hopefully answer that question, track bias either in historical races or in the upcoming race, or what you assume the pattern's going to be, is of utmost importance.
Yep.
Wrightsville has been playing pretty fairly of late. I'm assuming they're expecting a bit of rain tomorrow, but fine on Friday and Saturday, so it will be around soft 6, soft 7, I'm assuming. And all I really think that will happen is that it, especially out of the chute, I'd prefer to be on the pace than back. It won't be a huge advantage to be on the rail or swooping down the middle, I don't think. I just think on pace would be preferred, and most horses won't have a problem finding the better ground on Saturday. So in this case, I'm not actually going to worry about the bias too much, more about position and running. Anyway, I hope that answers it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll move on to the next runner, who is Brook Magic, because we saw on the speed map sheet is one of the 2 leaders we've got in the race. As you can see here, we've got the sort of track condition groups are colour coded, and one thing you notice about her is that a couple of wins and placings are on the very heavy tracks, heavy 9s, heavy 10s. That's obviously her preferred track condition. It's not the only ground she goes on, but she loves it. She struck a heavy 9 first up at Randwick, and was well on the market at $4 and won in what was a very strong race. So the horse that ran second to her, I think, or third, She Knows, came out and walked in at Randwick last Saturday. So that's already proven to be a very strong form reference. With the weight she's got to carry, 57.5, we can see that equates to a job of 102.5. And if she repeats her last start figure of 105, then she is going to be well, right up in the firing line in this race, and she's going to be on the speed too, which is a plus. The only slight negative I can find with her at this point is that whereas she was able to control the speed last time and lead on her own, I'm pretty confident she's going to have the Waterhouse horse Alassio for company this time, so she might not get everything her own way. That's only a slight query, but bearing in mind before this preparation, she'd really been known as a 1,000-metre horse rather than 1,100 and further. Maybe that's just going to be a slight negative. For that reason, I'm going to assess her off 104, just knock her back 1 point, just for that slight query about not getting it all her own way on Saturday. Now, where's that leave us? Yep, okay, so we move on to difficult to get. As we can see, she's done the bulk of her recent racing on good 3, good 4 tracks, a bit softer on Saturday. But if we go back further into her form, we see that she's, as a young horse, as a 2-year-old, she won on a heavy 10 at Muswellbrook. She's been placed on soft 7, placed in the city on a heavy 10, so it won't be the soft track that beats her on Saturday. The thing that concerns me a little bit about difficult to get is she was able to win a similar class race against not just fillies and mares, but males as well, carrying only 53.5 here. by nearly 3 lengths, and that has really impacted her handicap rating. So she has, she's not getting into these kind of races with lightweights anymore. As you can see, she's got 59.5 to deal with. That said, even with the 59.5, her job, her to-do figure is in the 104 range, which at her best she can do, as we saw on that day. So the weight on its own is not going to be enough to stop her either. But my concern would be that is, I wouldn't be envisioning that she could do any more than the 104. So if a horse like Brook Road, for instance, is able to do 104, 105, which is going to be a 1.5, 2.5 clear of its mark, then Difficulty Get's not going to win. But she is going to be competitive.
Brook Magic's just come into $2.20, by the way, mate.
Is that right? Okay, well that's...
No, just joking.
No. Look, I haven't actually, for the purposes of this exercise, I haven't looked at a pre-post market yet. So when it's concluded, we can have a look and see where we're at.
Our boys are pretty quick.
Yeah, okay. So, go for it if they can. Just to return to Difficult to Get, she ran in a stronger race against the males last start. She sat wide. She rated 5 points below her best. I'm saying that's a very forgivable run. She's going to get a nice run at the back of the speed on Saturday, and as touched on earlier, the soft track won't hold any fears for her. So I'm prepared to say she can do her best, but no more. So that gives us 104, which I'll enter. And as you can see that, I wouldn't read too much into these prices as they pop up, because they're incomplete and they won't be finalised until all 8 runners have been given marks. So don't read anything of that yet. We'll move on to Once More a Lady, who has been getting back in her races, as we saw on the map sheet. Yeah, had her map back at the rear, actually. She could be a little bit closer and sitting out wider possibly, but she has been getting back. She raced well out of her grade in the June Stakes, won by Jungle Edge, who's a group horse first up. She actually there wasn't much speed in that race, and they rode her a bit closer, and she weakened right out and was beaten 18 lengths. So, just a terrible performance, but in a totally unsuitable race. So, as you can see there, she rated 76 there. So if you were to price her off 76, you'd have 1,000 to 1 at least, but that's just, not feasible. As you can see, at her best, she's around the 102, 103 mark with a job of around 103. So similar to Difficult to Get, if she was able to produce her best, she'd be a live chance. But I'm not saying this is the only reason she got beaten so far last time, but if you add that poor run on the heavy 9 there to this unplaced effort in a midweek race at Canterbury, to this 4th on a soft 5, to this 5th on a soft 5, we're starting to build up a bit of a bank of evidence that maybe she wants dry, or good 3 to good 4 at worst, to do her best. So I'm not inclined, even though I'm being forgiven of that failure in the high pressure, high class race first up, I do have a question mark on ground in the soft 6 to 7 range. So I'm going to say something like 99, I think, which is a couple of lengths off her best on the wet track. So we'll move on. Getting through these all right. Now here we find Alassio, who, as I touched on earlier, is the other leader in the race. She's unbeaten. She's going through her grades very nicely, going from winning a maiden last year, being put away, returning at Wyong off some very nice trials, I might add, and walking in a restricted fillies and mares race there. Then made another step up to midweek grade on the Kensington track on the Queen's birthday, and yeah, she's undefeated. And this is something I do like to see in a horse's ratings figure pattern. 94 first out, and even after 11 months off, come back a much better horse, doing 101. And then to hold that and even improve at a point, stepping up in grade again. She is Very progressive. I'm quite confident in saying we haven't seen the best of her yet. This might be a good moment to just point out the figures in this column. As you can see, the M rate column here. That's nothing to do with their actual performance. That's derived from the horse's SP and taking into account the strength of the field, what figure the market was expecting it to do it on that occasion, regardless of where they finished. So as you can see, the market has a very strong opinion of ICO2, these figures, even in advance of what she's actually returned so far. I think she's progressive. She'll be up on the speed. She faces the same little question mark that Brook Road does, in that they can take each other on and set themselves up for something to run over the top of them. I'm still prepared to give her about 103 though, because I think she'll end up, 100, 104, 106, horse one day if she keeps progressing at the rate she has been. So even though I'm giving her a point more than she's done so far, 102 is not what I consider to be her, her peak by any means for her career or even this preparation. Okay, so we've given her mark, and that's been converted into a price, having done 5 of them so far.
Mark, just quickly.
Yep.
I've got a question here from John. When you're doing your ratings, do they translate from track to track and meeting to meeting, or do you go back to square one and start them afresh? As in, if someone's rated 105 at Randwick, is that the same as 105 at Rose Hill?
Yes, it is. It's the database is designed for that very reason, so that runs at different tracks, distances, different days can be compared easily. So in essence, this 102 is worth 102 at Caulfield or Flemington or Ascot or anywhere. So there are little vagaries and tricks to the database, which you sort of get to know by using it. Just as an example, I find that because the building blocks of the rating figures are time and in particular weight, if a horse is one pace and doesn't have any sort of turn of foot or acceleration, when it drops in weight, if it's done a figure, or just let's use 102 as an example, but it's been carrying 60 kilos, and then it drops down to 52 or something like that, I'm of the opinion that it's not going to run any faster with 8 kilos less on its back than it did with 60. So, and bearing in mind that the weight is one of the building blocks to rating, I'm in almost every case there going to say that its rating will fall along with its weight. So, that's just an example of a little vagary, but essentially, yes, horses can be compared different days, different tracks. That's actually the whole purpose of a ratings database and using a ratings method like this. It's to make those comparisons at a glance more easily.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so we're through 5 of them now. The market's starting to take shape. We move on to Amlak Millie, a horse who generally races in the country. As you can see, she has not been seen since the 11th of March at Grafton, so she's had over 3 months off and hasn't had a public barrier trial either, which makes it a little difficult. Soft ground, as we can see back here, and rating somewhere near her best won't be an issue. I do wonder whether a horse like this is going to be able to, who generally, as I said, races in the country, is going to be able to produce its best at a Saturday Metropolitan meeting in Sydney first up. It's a bit of a throw at the stumps in my view, and especially with a less than household name trainer in Danielle Campbell. Put it this way, if she can get this horse to do her best first up on Saturday, it's got some chance in the race, but it would be an amazing effort on behalf of both the trainer and the horse. As we can see, looking at its bank of ratings, it's 100's not out of the question for it. Got as high as 103 here, running a place up at the Sunshine Coast back in January. So just looking at that in just raw numbers terms, for the job of 101, you say, well, it could do 103. It's a chance, but I for the reasons I just mentioned, would be very sceptical of its ability to do 103 in a race like this first up. And for that reason, I'm going to take it back 2.5 lengths, 5 points, is 98. Without wanting to go into too much detail, horses I've noticed over the years in rating them on scales like this, you know, the sort of steps of 5 points from their peak, you know, to their next peak is a pretty reasonable, standardised way of doing it. As you would have noticed, as I'm doing other horses, I don't just use 5 points or nothing. I do go in between and do that all the time, but I do always have in the back of my mind that sort of template of using 5 point increments of improvement or going backwards as well. So that's basically the decision I've made with this horse here. I'm what I'd call a step, 5 point step off its best, which is 98. On to Duchess Pradrill, who is another one who might get midfield or back in the field from the inside barrier. She needs to do 101 to be a chance here, and as we can see, last prep she hit 102 once. She did that mark or more once, and she's done it a total of twice in her career. 101, 102. Now the thing that is apparent to me looking at the two occasions in which she's done 101 or more is they were both at Canterbury, which certainly suggests she has a liking for that track. She has trialled once. This is another point of concern for me, as seeing both of her last two preparations, she had 2 trials before she was taken to the races. And having had a look at the tape of the trial earlier, she didn't exactly set the world on fire in that either. I don't know if she's going to be fit enough or forward enough to produce her best in a race like this first up on Saturday. And for that reason, I'm going to knock her back a bit from her peak. I don't think she'll be ready to do a peak on Saturday, and give her 99. And moving on to the last horse in the field, who's quite an interesting one, Galamache from Victoria. I suspect that they have come here looking for a wet track. Her only win, which was in a 3-year-old fillies maiden at Ballarat last year, was on a soft 6, and she actually ran quite well on a very wet track at Bendigo last start. This really does look. It really does look like this horse is aiming high. If you look at the class of race she's been running in, you know, class 1 benchmark 64s, benchmark 70s, and she comes into $100,000 benchmark 80 in the Sydney metropolitan area. It is a sharp step up in grade. I will say for her, she's got no weight at all on her back, 50 kilos, and I looked at the tape of the Bendigo run earlier. She was the outside fence, or middle to outside, was definitely the best ground, and she was stuck near the fence that day, so her run was actually better than that figure suggests. She only needs to do 97. She had done 100 here, but she has never really been back near that since. I'm not completely dismissing her as a chance, considering she handles the wet and has no weight, but I would be surprised if she was able to win in this grade. So I'm going to give her close to a step of her best, 94, which isn't going to have her marked 100 to 1 or anything, but yeah, she's a minor chance for mine, if that. Now, so that's the end of them. That's the 8 of them. So now I'll go back to the master sheet. As you can see, these fields are now populated, and we have a market, and that market is actually arranged in order for us down here. So we've come up with Book Magic is a pretty clear favourite at 370 from Alassio, upscale, difficult to get, then a gap to the rest. Now this is, I'm sort of running through this fairly quickly just to, you know, give an overview of how I do things. At this point, once I've assigned them all ratings marks that I think are reasonable and the conditions they're going to be facing in the upcoming race, that I will take some time to reflect on this market and well, does this make sense to me? Am I happy with the order of the market? Am I happy with the definition? You know, the gaps between the horses in the market. Does the market I've come up with actually reflect what I think about the race? Because ultimately, that's the position I've got to find myself in. That the mathematical calculations are done by the program and by the spreadsheet for me, but if they don't accurately reflect my view on the race, then it's not much good to me. So I have to, at this point, think about whether that's the case. In this case, I might give this more thought between now and Saturday morning, and there may, of course, be scratchings too. Yeah, it seems to make sense to me. Brook Magic, as I said, comes out of a very strong race. It deserves to be clear favourite. Alassio is the promising one. Arguably, they could both be shorter, and I wouldn't be surprised when I look at the market to see one or both of them shorter than that, with my little query on them being that they might cut each other's throats in the lead. Upscale, I'm just thinking aloud here, just to give you an idea of how I do it. It's Upscale. I wonder if I've been too kind to her now. I think she might be a little close to the other two in the market, given the big weight and the fact she's first up and all that. So,
Mark, Brook Magic $3.
Yeah.
Alassio $3.20. Upscale $7.50.
Yeah. So even before hearing that, I was I'm leaning to saying I've got Upscale too close to the other two. So knock it back a point, 104. So that gets it to market price. Then difficult to get quite close, but I think I mentioned when I was going through when I got to her, when I was going through each horse, that I could make excuses for her last start and at her best, and she may well be ready to produce her best third up with the run she's going to get. I think she's a chance in the race. I wouldn't want to look beyond those top four, though, really, betting-wise.
So, Mark, just hypothetically, this is, you're confident with this, the way that you've set the market, you're happy with that. How would you then go about your staking strategy?
Okay, well, did you say Brook Magic was $3?
$3, yep.
Yeah, okay. So, of course, that's an early price and the market percentage will be pretty high. It's probably a good time to talk about how I actually do go about the selection process and, what is behind the bets I recommend. Why do I recommend some and not others? I don't use my markets as the only tool or only guide in my betting or selection strategy. There are so many variables in a race that I use the ratings and the prices as a means of identifying good betting races, and this actually could be one, because Brook Magic, when at this point, is nicely clear. It's 8.5% in probability terms clear of the next pick. And some research I've done since I started working on my own back in December of 2016 has shown me that when I have a horse in my final market 6% or more clear in probability terms, they have a very high strike rate in the high 30s and are very profitable. And they are the cornerstone of my betting, and they are the cornerstone of the horses I'll recommend in the service too. The strike rate like that is one very good in and of itself, but I also should point out that not every one of these horses is actually the market favourite either. So to achieve a strike rate like that on horses that aren't exclusively favourites, I would be very confident it's going to be profitable long term, and that's why I'm going to keep backing them and keep recommending them. So in terms of staking, I use for the favoured runners, for the top picks, I sort of use a scale of, which is quite conservative, to be honest. I just get the calculator up here. I just use a figure of 4.5. It used to be 5. That was more aggressive. I just 4.5 divided by the price. So if Brook Road was backable odds, so I could get 350. I'd be recommending a bet in the region of 1.3 units on it. anyone who's subscribed to the service will have noticed that I don't exclusively tip top picks or favourites, and I will recommend bets on horses wider in the market from time to time. But accordingly, because those horses have a much lower strike rate and I'm less confident of their chances, I actually drop the number I use to divide by to generate a stake for them too. So say for instance I wanted to recommend a bet on upscale, I'd probably use either 3 or 2, which would give us a bet of around 0.4 units. So it's not strictly, if I'm going to recommend, for argument's sake, I was going to recommend a bet on Brook Magic and upscale, the amount of units I wouldn't, the amount of units I'd recommend wouldn't be directly proportional to their probabilities in my market. I would skew quite heavily towards the favoured runner, the top pick, because time and the figures and research have shown me that's where my sweet spot is, and that's where my edge is, and that's where I've really got to concentrate the outlay, turnover, and the amount of units. So that sort of surprises some people who think it should all be done in in proportion to your assessed probability, but yeah, experience has told me that's not the case with the way I come up with my markets anyway.
Fantastic, mate. We've actually got through all the questions. Is there anything else you'd like to show the people that have tuned in?
I think I've covered pretty much everything. If there are any more questions, you can find me on Twitter or send me a message. I'm more than happy to field any questions on any of this sort of stuff or anything racing related really. So do follow me on Twitter and get in touch. Anyone who watches the rerun and wants to ask a question can do it that way. No, I think we covered everything. I think we've given a bit of an overview of how I do the form. I mean, necessarily it's pretty quick and a bit rough and ready, but I think hopefully the basics are covered. And I did want to make that point that my betting isn't strictly done to overlays or prices, that I do concentrate on the ones that are clear top picks when my market's all said and done. And yeah, hopefully we've made that clear for everyone.
Mark, we've got a couple that have come through late. What is the PIRR info to the right hand of the prices in the BTM pane? Yeah, okay, that's a position in run group statistic, which is automatically generated for us when we generate a form sheet like this. That's so you can see this is for this track and distance. This is for the Rosehill 1100 metres. So it's basically 5 position in running groups. A being leaders, E being at the rear, B handy, C midfield, and D fairly well back. You can see that it's a definite advantage to be on pace. These strike rate figures I find a tiny bit misleading because basically there's only one horse classified as a leader in each race, and in this case only one classified as handy as well. So it's easier for their strike rates to be higher. Obviously these groups of midfielders and backmarkers and so on have more in them. What it does tell me, I should point out here, this tells you how you'd go if you backed them all. If you're able to know the 100% what the leader was in advance, you'd make 7% on turnover at SP, 10% on turnover in horses racing handy. So if you actually knew it was going to settle 1-2 and could be 100% sure of it before the race in Rosehill 1100 metre races, you could turn a profit just backing them. Obviously, it's not that straightforward. Just the number of the raw number of winners is a good guide too, and we can see that while the strike rates are better for the leaders and horses that race handy, it's certainly not impossible to come from midfield or even back in the field at this track. Rosehill is a pretty fair track in my opinion, but yep, that's what that is. Mark, I've got a question from Mark. Hi Mark, do you attend the track on race days and do you bet with the on-course bookies?
I don't. Even though I concentrate on Sydney racing, I'm based in Melbourne, so that's a logistical obstacle, obviously. But I'm also really set up to do most of my work and betting from my office here at home, so that would be a difficulty too of going to the track. I would, however, say that I've actually been to a few meetings this year down in Melbourne, and the value you can get shopping on course, if that's available to you, is terrific. In these days of a very flat corporate market, the official price and top fluck being taken from that same flat market, there are distinct variations, particularly on favourites you can find on track. If on the track bookmakers playing to a much smaller crowd than the corporates are, keen to lay one, they will take a risk with a favourite and bet significantly over what you can get off track. And that's something I noticed. I'm sure I've been told it's the same in Sydney. So there is tremendous value in going to the track if you can for that reason, and also if you have any skill in yard watching and looking at the horses in the mounting yard, and you can add that to your form analysis, or if you're whatever service you're subscribing to, or whatever method you're using to make your selections, and you can add a yard component to that, you're at a great advantage as well. So even though it's not open to me, unfortunately, if it is open to you, I would recommend it.
Mark, question from Matthew: Are your recommended bets fixed price or BOB? If fixed price, how well does that price hold, or does it disappear quickly?
It actually, they can go off quickly, but from what I've noticed, and I've been doing this for Champion and other places for quite a while now, they tend to hold up okay. The occasions when they have gone off very quickly, there's clearly some other person or groups of people backing them. But that hasn't actually happened all that often with the fixed prices. Traditionally, I've tended to recommend more fixed odds bets than best of best or top fluck or whatever. But and the reason I've done that is that I've been able to pick shorteners pretty well as finding enough winners. So I was pretty happy to do that. I have noticed in the last month or so that I've recommended a few at prices that have looked very attractive to me, and they've actually got out from that price. So I'm going to do a bit of research over early next week actually, and see if anything's changed or whether I should change my approach in that. So that's something I'm going to be looking into. But on the do the prices hold up question, in most cases at this stage, yes, they do.
We've found that they definitely do, so that there's no issue there at all.
Well, as I said, that's only if a big syndicate or someone else is coming in at the same time that they're really going to crash, and that hasn't happened very often in my experience either.
Got a question here from John. How much emphasis do you put on the jockey and trainer combination when looking at horses, say in the top four?
Yeah, big factors, both of them. In terms of combination, if that's what John means, certain jockeys riding for certain trainers, it's something I'll look at. And especially if they might have been having a good run of late, I'll take that into account. I love big jockey changes. If you get an apprentice to a really informed and competent senior rider, that's certainly going to have an impact. With all these things, it's something I'll try and convert into ratings points. So the little half length scale that we use. So if there's a positive jockey change, that's just going to be reflected in the rating I give it, and that is then converted to a price. But jockey and trainer, huge factors. As you would have noticed by watching tonight, I don't do it as mechanically as a lot of other people. A lot of people have all of these factors given exact weightings in an algorithm, or very much stricter guidelines than I do. I do it a bit more loosely, but you can rest assured it's certainly being factored in.
Good question from Joseph, and I guess as a bit of a throwback to your previous role at Sportsbet, you would have seen this a lot, and how they determine your strategy. Market movers going out, coming in? Are they a good gauge? Do you utilise that? What's your thoughts on those?
I think, well, the betting landscape is dominated by some big syndicates now, and the betting fluctuations in the last few minutes are really determined by them. They're pushing Betfair in one direction or another, and subsequently the totes, and that is really what's driving the off-course market, the TAB fixed and the corporate market. So if excuse me, if they don't like one, and you do, I wouldn't solely for the reason it's drifting the market be put off backing it. If the horse was first up, I'm going to be likely to assume that it's paraded poorly, it's not ready, and I will go cold on a horse like that and sometimes even not back it. If it's a horse that, for instance, maps poorly, I know some of these bigger syndicates are very big on their speed maps, but that's a risk I'm happy to take, and I still think the horse is a value proposition, then a market won't put me off that. So it's very much case by case, and that's the thing you've got to remember is that it's really only a handful of people controlling the market. It's not like it's the aggregated knowledge of the whole market and, you know, dozens or hundreds of different opinions shaping the final price anymore. It's only really a very small number of people. And what they do is very successful, and their turnover is enormous, and I can see why they move the market like they do. But it doesn't mean that they're going to be right in 100% of cases, and they can also leave gaps. And some of those drifters and things that look big prices to us will win, and you've got to exploit that too.
Got a question from a couple of our great clients. Here's one from Tarak. Tarak says, if the fixed odds are lower than recommended, then up to what price should we take it, or do we take top fluck?
Good question. I sort of recommend the third best of a limited group, so the fixed price should be pretty attainable, and in a lot of cases even better. It's I'm not just cherry picking an outlying standout best price. Just as if say recommended at 350, I'd probably take down to 320 or 30, and shorter than that, yeah, maybe take best of the best or top fluck, or split your bet, get half on at the slightly shorter price, and maybe the rest at top fluck or best of best product. The thing to remember about market, especially early market fluctuations these days, is plenty of horses get knocked off in the morning and get back out in the last 10 minutes of betting. And one of the key reasons for that is the early market percentage is enormous compared to the final market percentage. So even a horse drifting in a case like that might not have anything behind it. It's just a function of the mathematics of the market percentage. So it's not going to go your way every time, but yeah, that's certainly worth thinking about. And as I said, I'd like to suggest that in most overwhelming majority of cases that the price I recommend is very easy to obtain.
Mate, we've got time for one more question. It's from Carl, a very astute punter. Are you looking at sectionals as well as the time weight rating?
Definitely. Very good questions. I probably should have touched on that earlier. Sectionals are critical to the post-race rating process. So it's the time component of the rating is not just raw or overall time. The pace of the race and the sectional times are critical. So just broadly, if a horse runs a fast overall time, given the conditions of the day, and it's also run fast closing sectionals, it's going to rate very high. That's sort of the perfect storm in getting a high rating: fast overall and fast sectionally. Fast closing sectionals, that's going to rate high. So yeah, just to answer Carl's question, absolutely, that is a key component of how we come up with the performance ratings figures.
All right, we'll squeeze one more in. Mate, this is a a very simple question, but one that I probably want to know as well. Why do you concentrate on Sydney rather than Melbourne, as being a Melbourne guy?
Two reasons. Firstly, I think if you can concentrate and get to know one pool of horses, you're better off than spreading yourself thinner and trying to cover 2 or 3 or more states. Especially the way I do the form, as you can see, it's pretty labour intensive and pretty manual. Not much of it is automated, apart from the pricing at the very end. And bearing that in mind, why Sydney? Well, it was my job for 10 years in corporate land. I was concentrating for so long on New South Wales racing as a trader and head trader. Once I was out on my own, I didn't really see any reason to change, just because I live here in Melbourne. And just as a side, I think it's the best racing in Australia too in Sydney. I think they've got the best jockeys. Field sizes aren't always great, but it's what I'm used to. I think the standard's great, and I'm more than happy to keep concentrating on it.
Mark, guys, that's about all we've got time for. Thank you very much for tuning in. Mark, thank you for your time tonight.
No, thanks a lot, Daniel. Really enjoyed it.
Thoroughly enjoyed it, and well, I guess we'll get on to our winner. A winner tonight of the 1 month of the New South Wales winners subscription is Sam Toole. So Sam, I'll be in contact with you tomorrow, but I will also be in contact with everyone else who registered for the webinar and attended. Guys, fire in the questions to me, give me a buzz tomorrow. I'll chat to you about this guy's a genius. He knows what he's on about. Stick to the staking plan and the strategies and you'll make money. Mark, thanks again, mate.
Thank you very much, Daniel. That was great.